Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
If you are interested in serving on your local Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council, the deadline to apply is Friday, March 21st. The councils provide information and recommendations to the Federal Subsistence Board on subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing. For more information on the advisory councils and how to apply, call 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov. This message sponsored by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on the 6th of March. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with the latest weather information around your community or any part of Alaska by going to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. Give us a call on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. Find each Weather Service office on Twitter, on Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska, and on YouTube during the afternoon. You get your daily afternoon briefing there at the NWS Anchorage channel. And then after this broadcast from our broadcast partners, Alaska Public, go to alaskapublic.org, and on the right side of your screen you'll find the video player that shows the most recent broadcast there, or you can search out the latest broadcast channel by going to AKWX-TV on YouTube itself. Here's a look at what's going on across the southeast. As we were talking about yesterday, a storm moving up from the Pacific Northwest and the Eastern Gulf is bringing moisture and a lot of lift with it, and that will give the possibility of rain and snow to many parts of southeast. Some of that could really ramp up into pretty decent accumulations around Hyder, 8 to 14 inches of snow between tonight, tomorrow, and into Saturday. A winter weather advisory is posted for you. A winter storm watch posted north of Sitka to Juneau and up toward Gustavus. That could include around 4 to 8 inches of snow. So a winter storm watch for tomorrow and into Saturday for that area. And a little bit further north, a winter weather advisory, wind chill advisory, I should say, for the Haines and Klondike highway areas. Wind chill values there could drop to about 30 below, but after that, the winter storm watch will be in effect for you. And in those areas, 10 to 14 inches of snow could be possible again. So that's, we're talking about a Friday into Saturday period as the storm is working northward. Now, it's not going to remain all snow. It looks like this is going to mix in with rain and eventually turn over to rain as we go through that period. So heavy wet snow could be working into the southeast area. On top of that, a lot of changes in the wind and gusts will be working through southeast, especially the inner channels and areas prone to gap winds. So if you're in one of those spots, tonight would be a really good point to think about maybe adjusting what's outside or tied down or what's not tied down or covered up because the winds and the snow and then eventually the rain will be working through southeastern parts of Alaska as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. Looking further northward, wind chill advisories are in effect for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Wind chill values there could drop to 30 to 35 below in some cases. So we're looking at, 50 to 55 below from the Prudhoe Bay to Dead Horse area, Kaktovik area. That'll go through tonight and into tomorrow once again. When I said 30 below, we probably thought, hey, time for the Bermuda shorts, right? Yeah, no, sorry, 50 to 55 below. We'll get that right. Many other areas there will be dealing with the wind and probably blowing and drifting snow all the way out around the St. Lawrence Seacoast and through the Bering Strait area, but no warnings or advisories are posted for that at this point. Here's a look at the satellite picture now across the Bering Sea, and we are still dealing with that east to westerly flow coming off the continent, really crossing all the way down the Yukon Valley and out to sea. And you can see it's got a pretty dry effect there, moving some low stratus around the Bering, occasionally though allowing some moisture to work up with more recent disturbances. Another much stronger disturbance there south and west of Petropavlovsk and north of eastern Asia. As that continues tracking northward, we'll see a kind of a gathering of moisture working out across the central and northern Pacific. Now, this is another storm that's organizing now. You can see a little more organization here south of Unalaska. And all this is working together to keep the Gulf relatively unstable. But we've got high pressure that is sitting up across the coastal plain, combined with areas of low pressure that are just kind of sneaking into the periphery of that high pressure pattern. We're starting to show some weakness here across the eastern Gulf, and that's where the storm's coming from. So I'm going to step out of the way here so you can see the storm coming out of the bottom corner of your screen. Watch this here as the moisture is gathering and moving north and west. That'll slowly get closer and closer to Haida Gwaii. So as we saw today, a little bit of cloud cover just kind of worked its way up over Haida Gwaii by late afternoon. It looked like they were reporting some mixed precipitation there, nothing real serious yet, but this is going to move fairly quickly up the eastern part of the Gulf. And this was at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Watch one more time as this wave is moving into the central and eastern Gulf. So here's the leading edge of this, and probably by tonight and overnight into early tomorrow morning, this is going to be across southern parts of southeast. So we're looking at a pretty quick onset for snow for parts of Hyder and the eastern sections of southern southeast. And then eventually through the day, the weather's going to change as you go into central and northern parts of southeast. So what you've had today, really what you've had for the last week or so, is quickly coming to an end with this next disturbance. Looking at across the interior, a lot of low clouds from time to time, but really not a whole lot of precipitation. Places like Fairbanks could still be looking at some occasional light snow or flurries. We saw some flurries up across the coastal plain today. A few snow showers around Bristol Bay, out around the Pribilofs and Shemya, and blowing snow out around the Bering Strait and St. Lawrence seacoast. Otherwise, pretty quiet. It was breezy and cool, and where the winds were blowing, wind chill values were a little bit uncomfortable, of course. But all in all, the dry weather continues across the interior. Again, as we head through tonight, you could see some light snow around the middle Tanana Valley and points east. High pressure across the northern Yukon at 1,024 millibars should be pushing the best chance of snow across the Beaufort Seacoast into northern Canada. So that should not be working its way westward. And you'll see that east to westerly flow pushing snow chances further away from the continent. So snow showers are possible around the Aleutians as a frontal boundary lingers there. But all in all, dry weather continues pretty much everywhere except, again, southeast, where it is building in fairly quickly. As we get into Friday, a low pressure system across the central Gulf drops to 976 millibars. The triple point is offshore, but you're going to have some changes in the wind. The winds should be coming up during the day. Stronger gusts are possible there. And again, a winter storm watch is posted for the central and northern parts of southeast. Wind chill advisories there for the Chilkoot White Pass area. And also looking at some winter weather advisories around Hyder for 10 to 14 inches of snow. And like I said, some of that's going to start to mix in with rain as we go. Most of the precipitation and really most of the cloud cover looks to stay off of the south central coastline. You might get some rain and snow showers crossing through Kodiak Island, becoming more likely just all snow across the Alaska Peninsula. A rain-snow mix for some parts of the central and eastern Aleutians, and then a better chance for snow showers the further away you get from the mainland. It looks like flurries will be possible across the Beaufort Seacoast, areas of low clouds and fog with that onshore flow. And once we get into Saturday, low pressure is working its way closer to Prince William Sound, kind of backing away a little bit from southeast. But rain will be more likely your source of precipitation there as we get into central and southern parts of the islands, and a rain snow mix mainly north of Juneau, it looks like at this point. Some of the higher terrain, of course, still dealing with snow showers. And then we're looking at more of a northerly flow coming down Cook Inlet than anything else. So that's pretty dry weather for most in south central, including the Mat-Su valleys. Once you get into the interior, an east to westerly flow aloft will continue, and dry weather will continue for most of the Tanana Valley, save for a few flurries around Fort Yukon, up toward the Brooks Range. The high pressure's in charge there, and dry weather will continue with snow showers scattered around the Bering and the Pribilofs. Low pressure sits across the central Aleutians, and you can see some hints of warmer weather trying to work its way north out of the Pacific there, but that will probably just give a little bit more of a wiggle to the wave that's sitting out there in the form of a stationary boundary. So the main player in town, at least right now, would be that 990 millibar low as we start up the weekend. This will probably try and work its way westward just a little bit more. Temperature-wise across southeast today, not a bad day, certainly a milder day than you've had with the very clear but dry and cold weather. Temps around Juneau at 31, 37 in Sitka, mid to upper 30s for southern parts of southeast. Petersburg around 34. Yakutat was 33. Prince William Sound temperatures in the mid 30s. Anchorage, Kenai in the upper 20s, 34 around Homer. 18 around Glen Ellen, 30 in Talkeetna along the Susitna, and Tanana looking at 10, while 19 was the temperature recorded in Fairbanks today. Denali National Park and close to Healy, about 9 degrees. Looking northward, Fort Yukon was 2 below. Arctic Village, about 2 below as well. 15 below for Anaktuvuk Pass. The Arctic coast, anywhere from 9 below around Barrow, which seemed quite warm when you compare it to temperatures around Wainwright at 23 below, Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse around 22 below, and Kaktovik at 12 below. Kivalina and Shishmaref were showing temperatures around 7 to 10 degrees. The same goes for Kotzebue. 17 above in Nome. Unalakleet was looking at 11 degrees. Grayling 9 degrees above zero. 13 above in Galena and Huslia, about 12. 10 above in McGrath and 11 below, above in Bethel, with the southwestern coast in the teens, 20s. But once you got into places like King Salmon, temperatures shot up above freezing into the lower 30s and then upper 30s as you head out towards Sand Point. Cold Bay and Falls Pass in Alaska, Dutch Harbor about 37. St. Paul was 18, St. George was 20, and upper 20s and lower 30s for the central and western chain. Overnight low temperatures will stay in the upper 20s and lower 30s for the Alaska Peninsula and the chain, 18 in St. Paul, 6 in Nunivak Island. McGrath looking at 18 below, 20 below in Fairbanks, anywhere from 20 to 30 below across northern sections of the Yukon Valley. And then the Arctic coast about 20 to 25 below, 30 below though around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse. Southeast, teens and 20s with warmer weather creeping in from the south. Around Prince William Sound and South Central, teens will be the rule, about 10 in Talkeetna and 32 around Kodiak, much warmer there. 37 for the high tomorrow. 20s for some of the interior spots of southeast, but most of the coastal areas and most of the southern sections will be considerably warmer tomorrow, anywhere from 40 to about 45 degrees in some areas like Ketchikan and Annette. Around Anchorage and Matsu, low to mid 30s there. Homer and Seward, both above freezing. Upper 20s and lower 30s for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island again 37. The interior single digits and low teens, with areas north of the Yukon looking at temps still sub-zero. Arctic Village down to 15 below, anywhere from 15 to 20 below across the Arctic coast. Kotzebue Sound region 0 to 5 below, 10 above in Nome for Unalakleet, looking at temperatures at 5 to 10. Bethel should see highs near 20 tomorrow, 20s and 30s for the Bristol Bay region, and highs nearing 40 degrees for a large part of the Alaska Peninsula, and still holding close to freezing around the central and western chain. Flying weather then, MVFR conditions should be expected across a large part of the coastal plain, especially east of Wainwright. They're out toward Kaktovik, and blowing and drifting snow still possible around the St. Lawrence Island. Southern parts of the Bering Sea still looking at a widespread MVFR condition. Same goes for the Gulf, and of course southeast, with the snow expected to move in from south to north during the day tomorrow. IFR conditions across the eastern parts of the chain and just south of Sand Point. Your past conditions then look pretty good for the interior, but anywhere else again across southeast we'll be dealing with restricted visibilities through the day. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass expected to be VFR. We expect most of the Alaska Range to be VFR, really all the way around the Horn. Rainy and windy pass expected to be visual. Same goes for Isabel Pass, and once you get into Mentasta Pass, that should be fine. Tanita Pass VFR. Portage Pass looks to be pretty nice. Might be some chop around, but not any restrictions to visibility. And Chilkoot and White Pass, probably your last good VFR day will be tomorrow, because things will be changing as we go toward the end of the day. Freezing levels, surface freezing line wrapping around the Gulf and then jogging over the Alaska Peninsula and then back south across the central Aleutians there. And here comes that warm weather moving up the central and eastern Gulf. Icing potential with that below 12,000 feet and above 4,000 feet. Expect that to work quickly northward as we go through the day and into Saturday there. So watch for some aviation changes there through the weekend. Below 10,000 and above 2,000 across the central Aleutians and north toward the Pribilofs and also across the Arctic coast. Most of the interior should be pretty dry. The jet stream right now shows a very pronounced trough across the Bering and into the North Pacific, and then you can see that quick jog northward with high pressure trying to push into the northern parts of the Wrangell St. Elias and toward Prince William Sound. We've got a little bit of a jet streak coming in across the north part of that will enhance some of the lift underneath, and a northwesterly flow coming across the Beaufort Seacoast around 60 to 80 knots, more of a northeasterly flow moving south and west across the western parts of the Bering Sea. This is the main storm track right now. This is what's tapping into the moisture, and this is what's working up towards southeast as we head into tomorrow. At 9,000 feet, kind of a messy pattern here, but the overall picture should really focus on that south and westerly flow coming into southeastern Alaska, again driving the moisture toward your homes. 30 and 50 knots seen around the eastern parts of the Gulf, more of an east to westerly flow across the lower Yukon Valley. 15 to 20 knots coming across the Chugach as well. And northwesterly flow coming onto the eastern Brooks Range between 10 and 30 knots, more of a northwesterly flow develops south of the Aleutian chain. At 3,000 feet, a very similar pattern. We've got our easterly flow coming across the Yukon, anywhere from 20 to about 40 knots at its strongest. An onshore flow around Point Barrow, look at that, a northerly flow coming due south, 20 knots. And then you've got your low pressure system here sitting across the Gulf of Alaska. As we look at turbulence, there should be some wind issues as we go through southeast tomorrow. It's probably going to be low-level wind shear. Quite a few areas will be experiencing some pretty strong gusts. Some areas looking at gusts up to 40 and 50 miles per hour. Below 6,000 feet, do expect occasional to widespread moderate across a large part of the interchannels, especially in coastal areas, and then offshore closer to the frontal boundaries as they shift closer to southeast. A number of troughs have set up across the interior, working from east to west, and as that happens, the winds will probably pick up across the mountains as lee side areas will drag that wind down a little bit faster. Below 4,000 feet across the eastern parts of the chain, probably reaching some occasional moderate, and then most of the Bering Sea should be relatively quiet there. And we'll take a look at the ice edge very quickly before we head into our marine zones. Once again, the latest ice edge forecast is always available at pafc.arh.noaa.gov/ice. So with the easterly flow, the ice edge has not dropped too much further south from what we were talking about yesterday. We'll have an update, of course, for you again tomorrow. We'll be back in just a few minutes with a look at your marine weather. Stay tuned.
In like a lion, out like a lamb. Hey there, stargazers. I'm Marlene Hidalgo, science teacher from Miami, Florida. And boy, don't you just love spring? Although I really love the brilliant stars of winter, I also really look forward to the soft muted stars of spring that echo the gentle colors of Earth's landscape.
I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory, and I have always been fascinated by folklore, especially phrases that we learn during childhood and repeat all our lives. Yet frequently, we have little or no idea where they come from. For instance, I'm sure you've heard that old phrase that if March comes in like a lion, it'll go out like a lamb. But have you ever wondered where this phrase came from?
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Plow Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. Guy Otwell, who produces a wonderful yearly astronomical calendar, has long suggested that maybe this phrase about the lion and the lamb got its imagery from the heavens. Let's take a look.
Okay, we've got our sky set up for the 1st of March any year about 8 p.m. your local time. And if you're far from city lights and go out and look toward the northwest, you'll see the dim stars that make up Aries the ram, or lamb.
But if you look in the opposite direction, about the same height above the horizon in the northeast, you'll see the constellation Leo the lion. So here we have wonderful night sky images that match our phrase, a lion and a lamb, both about the same height above the horizon in early evening at the beginning of March.
But what will you see if you go out at the same time after a month has passed on March 31st? Well, quite a different story, because on March 31st at 8 p.m., the lion will be almost overhead and the lamb will be smack dab on the western horizon. Now, usually the weather at the end of March is milder than the weather at the beginning of March. So our skies at 8 p.m. on the last day of March with the lamb setting support the fact that March is going out like a lamb.
However, if we turn our skies back to March 1st, 8 p.m., we see that the lion is rising into the night sky at the beginning of March, which reinforces the idea that March usually begins with fiercer weather, comes in like a lion.
So perhaps long ago, someone tied this all together, noticing that on the first day of March, Leo the lion was rising up into the heavens, whereas at the end of March, Aries the lamb was leaving them. And perhaps they decided to poetically link them both to the weather and came up with the old phrase, simply borrowing from the heavens in an attempt to correlate the seasonal changing of the constellations with the seasonal changing of the weather.
But as far as astronomers are concerned, March will always come in with Leo the lion rising and will always go out with Aries the lamb setting. But this is not true of the planets. So let's take a look at where the wandering stars will be next week.
While you're out next week after sunset searching for Aries the ram, which is a rather dim pattern of 3 stars, a much easier light to locate will be almost overhead, the bright giant planet Jupiter. Next Monday, March 10th, the moon will be really close to Jupiter, about a fist away from the king of the planets.
The other 4 naked eye planets are in the pre-dawn sky, along with the Milky Way and a constellation that just shouts summer, Scorpius the Scorpion.
We're facing southwest before dawn next week, and the rapidly approaching and rapidly brightening red planet Mars will be easy to spot just above the bright blue Spica.
About 2.5 fists to the left of Mars is the ringed planet Saturn, and just to its left is Scorpius the Scorpion. And for those of you with dark skies, the Milky Way is very well placed for viewing.
Farther east of the Milky Way is brilliant Venus, and beyond it, very close to the horizon, is pinkish Mercury.
So that's Mars, Saturn, Venus, and Mercury all lined up for your pre-dawn viewing pleasure.
May you always have clear skies in March for viewing the Lion and the Lamb.
It's easy if you remember to
Keep looking up.
All right, back to southeast now for your marine forecast. Remember, winter weather is moving in. A winter weather advisory is posted for areas around Hyder, where you could see up to 8 to 14 inches of snow from Friday into Saturday there. A winter storm watch is posted for northern parts of southeast for tomorrow and into Saturday. You could be looking at 4 to 8 inches of snow around the Juneau to Gustavus area and north of Sitka. And for the Chilkoot and White Pass areas, the Klondike Highway region, you could be looking at as much as 10 to 14 inches of snow. But first, for that area, a wind chill advisory is posted for valleys that could be as cold as 30 below, thanks to some of the wind moving there. And you can see the wind on the forecast tomorrow coming out of the north. That's the wind that's going to make it feel exceptionally colder in those passes. 40-knot winds there with 8-foot seas, and freezing spray will threaten the north and southern parts of the Lynn Canal. Northeasterlies coming through some of the central interchannels with 6-foot seas, and southeasterlies indicating that frontal boundary working northward at first. A 35-knot wind with 7 to as high as 11-foot seas. Offshore winds continue for most of the coastal areas, again north of Craig. Looks like a 35-knot flow in some of the strongest regions with 8 to 11-foot seas there on Saturday. And again, snow at first and then eventually working in with rain as we get toward Friday night and Saturday from south to north. For Saturday, again, higher gusts are still possible in all areas. A northerly flow in the Lynn Canal, southeasterlies now in the inner channels. South of that, 30 to 35 knots, 6 to 7-foot seas are expected. And you can see the southerly flow working its way up the coastal areas, southeasterly flow north of Gustavus and out toward Yakutat with 18 to 20-foot seas into the north and eastern parts of the Gulf. For south central, a really different story. On the other side of the storm, we've got north and northeasterly winds. This is a dry flow for the Cook Inlet, 10 to 20-knot winds. 25-knot winds west of the Barren Islands, 30-knot winds inside Shelikof Strait, and the western Gulf looking at winds from 25 to 35 knots, 8 to 14-foot seas there. Inside Prince William Sound, 10-knot winds from the north and east with a 2-foot sea, but do expect higher gusts around the Copper River Delta area. 15 to 25-knot winds on either side of Middleton Island in and outside of Prince William Sound. 20-knot winds on the western side of the Gulf as you head into Saturday. And winds become a little more light and variable on the north and south end of the Cook Inlet and inside Shelikof Strait. South of Kenai, though, you're looking at more of a north and northeasterly flow heading toward the Barren Islands with a 3-foot sea and ice-free waters. Across the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to 20-knot winds north of the peninsula with 4 to 6-foot seas. The smaller seas, of course, inside Bristol Bay. On the Pacific side, you're looking at 25 to 35-knot winds with 13 to 15-foot seas, really from the north and east. And then the winds become a little more northerly with time on Saturday, 15 to 20-knot flow there, and 15 knots blowing offshore into the Pacific from 8 to 9 feet. Across the Aleutians, a north and northwesterly flow will rule the day across the west central parts of the chain, 15 to 20 knots, more of a north and northwesterly flow for the central islands, and then northeasterlies coming into Unalaska and Nikolsky between 20 and 25 knots. The higher seas on the south side, on the Pacific side, 8 to 10-foot seas are expected there on Saturday. More of a northwesterly flow in the Pacific side from Adak to Nikolsky at 15 to 20 knots, 7 to 8-foot seas there. Northeasterlies around Nikolsky and Unalaska, and then a light and relatively variable flow for Kiska and Attu. 8 to 10-foot seas are expected for Saturday, again with a chance for some scattered snow showers. For Friday, a northeasterly offshore flow coming out of Norton Sound and out of Kuskokwim Bay as high as 20 to 30 knots. A 7-foot sea is expected around the Pribilofs, 8-foot seas around St. Matthew, and just around the Kuskokwim Bay, 5-foot seas there in the ice-free waters. Freezing spray, some of that heavy, is expected on Friday, and as we get into Saturday, you'll notice the threat continues there. The wind's shifting a little bit around the Bering Strait communities and St. Lawrence Island. 30-knot wind flowing there in the Kuskokwim Bay, 20 knots with a 5-foot sea. Northeasterly is expected around the Pribilofs, down to 15 knots now with a 5-foot sea to start the weekend. And across the Arctic coast, a westerly flow from Point Barrow east toward Kaktovik, 10 to 15 knots with a northwesterly flow coming into Point Ley and Wainwright. Northerlies a little bit stronger out of the Chukchi, heading for Kotzebue Sound at 20 to 25 knots. By Saturday, northeasterlies now offshore of Wainwright and Cape Lisburn, an offshore flow for Barrow, and then the westerlies are diminishing there from Prudhoe Bay out toward Kaktovik, around 10 to 15 knots. That's a look at your marine forecast. Once again, a storm is moving across the eastern parts of the Gulf and will bring an end to the pretty dry and somewhat cold weather for southeast. Warmer southeasterly winds are moving northward tonight. Expect areas of snow to develop across the southern inner channels and coastal areas of southeast as we go through the overnight hours and into tomorrow. Winter weather advisory for areas around Hyder with 8 to 14 inches of snow possible there. For the northern parts of southeast from Sitka to Juneau and northward, we're expecting anywhere from 4 to 8 inches of snow may be possible in those areas, and 10 to 14 inches of snow around the Chilkoot and White Pass regions, with a wind chill advisory posted for you and for the Arctic coast. So be careful and bundle up if you're traveling in those areas tonight. As we go into Friday, low pressure will organize a little bit more across the Gulf, drop to 976 millibars for south central. Most of the precipitation stays offshore, scattering of snow across the southern Bering and the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians, and a small area of snow working through Fairbanks will start to diminish. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If you are interested in serving on your local Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council, the deadline to apply is Friday, March 21st. The councils provide information and recommendations to the Federal Subsistence Board on subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing. For more information on the advisory councils and how to apply, call 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov. This message sponsored by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.